Over the last few weeks, we've seen some pretty impressive moves away from DEI and woke policies within companies. Meta being one of the larger examples of them, ending some of their fact checking issues and ending a lot of their DEI programs for racist hiring and firing programs entirely. This is a good thing. It's not complete, it's not enough, and not every company is doing it, but some are, and less racism, less sexism, less bigotry in the hiring and firing within big tech is a good thing. But how are tech journalists responding? Well, they're responding exactly how you would expect them to respond. They are rallying, they are circling the wagons in defense of racism and sexism in big tech. It's crazy to me that this is happening. I mean, it's expected, it's predictable, it's just par for the course, but it's still crazy that almost every tech news outlet on earth is currently running right now stories defending racist and sexist hiring and firing policies in big tech in extreme overt political ways. I'm going to walk you through some of it now. And the reason I want to talk to you about it is this. The Lunduke Journal comes out and publishes a tremendous amount of material relating to these policies within every big tech company on the planet, whether it's Microsoft or IBM or Red Hat or whoever. And in doing so, inevitably, people, other tech journalists, other tech enthusiasts and whatnot, point at the Lunduke Journal and say, Lunduke Journal, you're being political. You're being political by being against racism and sexism in big tech, right? This is my stance. I've been firm and consistent. I'm against racism and sexism in tech. So I get pointed at and they say, you're being too political, gosh darn it. Well, here's the thing. Every single tech news outlet of any worth really at all are covering these same stories, but from the opposite point of view. They're covering it from the racism and sexism in tech is a really good thing and must be defended at all cost in order to hurt white people. I'm not joking with you. That's literally what they're saying. Flat out, those are their clear messages. So all of the tech news outlets, all of them, are being extraordinarily, extremely political. It's just that the Lunduke Journal is the only tech news outlet that's being political in the I'm against racism way. That's worth looking at. Let's just look at a couple of these here. This one comes from Computer World. Oh, I go to Computer World for my pro-racism and sexism political rants. Apparently, go to computerworld.com. There is a recent piece written by Stephen Von Nichols, who I've met many times. He seems like a very reasonably nice guy. He's been around in the writing for tech news outlets for years and years. He wrote an article for Computer World called The Death of DEI in Tech. Okay. With Elon Musk leading the way, racism, sexism, and all the other isms look to be heading back into the tech workplace. Of course, when they say racism and sexism, they mean the opposite, right? A lot of these words that they say have opposite meanings to reality. It's crazy. I'm just going to read you a couple of quotes from this one. Save me from rich white men. He opens with that. Save me from rich white men it's ridiculous. Who insist they and their kind are being discriminated against. Tech entrepreneur Elon Musk, majority owner, not the founder of SpaceX, Tesla, and numerous other leading companies, insists, quote, DEI is just another word for racism. It is. He screams, DEI must DIE. The point was to end discrimination, not replace it with different discrimination, end quote. And then he goes on to say, the author goes on to say, really, I'm an older, relatively well-off straight white man, and I know darn well that I owe a lot of my success to the fact that, except for my age, everything in the U.S. economy has been set up to benefit me. In baseball terms, I started the game on first base. Black men have to get a hit to get on base. Black women step to home plate for their at-bat with 2 strikes against them. Musk and his ilk, he grew up with a millionaire emerald mine-owning father father in South Africa and started on third base. Right. So they goes on and on and on like this, basically vilifying, demonizing individuals, right? That's the style over and over again. Vilify and demonize, and then turn the tables of anything those villainous, evil white men want is inherently bad. And so the villainous white men in this case, like Musk, are opposed to hiring practices where you hire someone based on their skin color, their gender, their sexual orientation, or what have you, because those things are discriminatory. Those things are anti-meritocracy. It's the opposite of what you should do in a company. But because the evil white man says it, therefore it's bad. That's the whole setup here. Reading one additional quote here. Quote, "The laws were one thing. Making it a workplace reality was another." And they're talking about making diversity, equity, and inclusion a reality in the workplace, right? "Over the next few decades, dedicated diversity professionals began emerging within organizations, often holding titles like Chief Diversity Officer. As businesses became more diverse, companies also started recognizing that diversity is good for business. While DEI is also about basic fairness, it turns out that businesses that adopt it tend to do better than their rivals." That's so demonstrably onto it. That's why it's become a cliche, the whole go woke, go broke sort of thing. It's become a cliche. It's so obvious. We've seen it so many hundreds of times. Go too woke, the shows do poorly. Go woke, the movies don't do well. Go woke, the games don't sell well that are being developed by these tech firms, right? It's over and over and over again, a big repeating pattern. Scrolling down, quote, "Facts, even accounting facts, count for little as American technology leaders bow to Donald Trump. For some, like Musk and Meta chief Mark Zuckerberg, it's all about rising to power on the right-wing wave. For others, it's simply about preserving their billions, preserving the gains of blacks, gays, older workers, whoever is not on their priority list." Wow. And so this is on and on. This is not, I'm quoting this one because it has so many of these quotes all in one article. But realistically, you go down the line of other outlets, and they're all posting the same thing, whether it's a Fast Company. This one from Channel Futures, which covers like tech channel business stuff. Same exact thing. Talking about how some of those companies are still committed to DEI, and that's a real good thing. This one from ComputerWeekly.com. "Diversity in tech. In 2024, collaboration is vital for DEI progress." And this is crazy to me. So I'm going to read a little quote to you from this. Again, and this is just from yesterday morning. "The age of artificial intelligence, AI," I like how they put AI in quotes. Just so you know, artificial intelligence means AI, "is changing the IT landscape, but with an ongoing diversity crisis in the tech sector." And when they link to that, what they're linking to is they're telling you that Meta not being diversity hiring is a crisis. Okay, so less racist hiring is the crisis. I continue. "It remains to be seen whether the rapid development of these technologies will ultimately help or hinder our lives." Speaking at the annual Computer Weekly and Harvey Nash Diversity in Tech event, I'm going to stop right there. They just referenced an annual event on diversity in tech. That's a real thing. If you go to wearetechwomen.com, you can read information on the Harvey Nash and Computer Weekly Diversity in Tech Conference, which took place, I believe, this last November. I believe this was not last November when this took place. Each year, the Diversity in Tech Conference explores key topics aimed at furthering the diversity agenda within the tech sector. This year's theme is accelerating diversity. Okay. So I need to make this very clear here. This is a conference organized by Computer Weekly, the publication, the old magazine, Computer Weekly, in order to further their quote, further the diversity agenda, right? What is that telling you? Well, they're saying flat out, they're not covering the news from any objective standpoint. Their whole purpose, the whole purpose of Computer Weekly is a political agenda. Their whole purpose, so much so that they hold events. They literally put together entire conferences specifically to further that agenda, and then they followed up with articles about the agenda. What is the agenda? That you should hire and fire people and promote people in big tech companies based on skin color, gender, and sexual orientation. That's their stated agenda. That is psychotically racist and sexist. And what's more, incredibly illegal. It is illegal in all 50 states within the United States. There are state laws in all 50 states about this. And there are federal government laws about this, and several lawsuits going on right now against a multitude of companies. I've been covering the IBM and Red Hat lawsuits, which there are several of ongoing now, with more coming in the first quarter of this year. But there are more from multiple companies. I'm going to go on to continue reading this quote from computerweekly.com because it makes me want to stab the screen a little bit. The CEO of Harvey Nash, the parent company of Nash Squared, highlighted at the event the importance of actively creating opportunities for underrepresented groups to join the technology sector if we want to make the industry a more diverse place. It's on us, all of us, not just the HR community, not just the CIOs and the CDOs and the CEOs to make a change. It's on all of us, she said. She continues, every time we think about hiring or promoting or encouraging someone to step up and represent a department, we need to think about how we're doing that and giving somebody an opportunity to stand up and shine. We have to do that every single day in everything we do, or nothing will change. And when she says that, we need to think about how we're doing that, she is specifically referring to doing that specifically for people based on skin color, gender, and sexual orientation. It's crazy. Every time you promote, encourage someone to step up, hire, anything, according to this CEO of Harvey Nash at the Computer Weekly Diversity Conference, you have to think specifically about ethnicity. You have to think about doing it in a racist and sexist way. It's insane. It's patently insane. But what's crazy here is so many of these tech outlets are pushing this agenda blatantly. They're even calling it their agenda over and over and over again. And it's all of them. It's all of them. You go to Gizmodo, you go to The Verge, you go all over the place, and you see this agenda over and over again. Reading again from the computerworld.com article, quote, others such as Meta, where Zuck is suffering from a middle-aged crisis with his gold chain, newly curled hair, and sudden weird fascination with masculine energy, appears to be on their way to getting rid of their existing diverse workforce. He says he wants to, quote, move out low performers faster, end quote. I expect that the upcoming 5% cut that they've announced, Meta's got some little bit of layoffs coming up. I expect the upcoming 5% cut to come mostly from people of color, older workers, and LGBTQ staffers. You get the picture. Okay, so is there any reason at this point to think that Meta's upcoming layoffs, which will be significant, but they're not like laying off half the company? It's about a 5% reduction in workforce. He's right about that. Is there any reason to think that those are being targeted at LGBTQ staffers? No, it's going to be underperforming. According to the CEO of the company, he wants to move out low performing workers. That could be anyone, right? Now, if the company had been historically hiring people based purely on skin color, gender, sexual orientation, and the like, and overlooking low performance in order to get more people that meet those characteristics into the jobs, which is racist and sexist and bigoted and stupid. If that happens, then yes, you probably do have an increased and an artificially elevated number of individuals that are low performing that meet those characteristics because you specifically hired to meet those characteristics at the expense of, well, now you have low performing people, right? Now, that's not to say you can't have extremely high or extremely low performing people of any ethnicity, of any gender, of any sexual orientation. The fact is, it really doesn't matter. But if you do have elevated levels of individuals in a specific demographic that have lower performance, and then you decide to do layoffs of people who have lower performance, you are going to have an increased representation in the layoffs of people of that demographic. That's how that works. If you specifically said, I will hire anyone with the name of John, no matter how bad John performs, no matter how much John just screws around at work, if his name is John, I'm going to hire him. And then 2 years later, you're like, you know what? We really need to do some layoffs. Let's lay off people who are not performing well. Well, good odds you're going to be laying off a lot of people named John. So sorry, John, sayonara. But that doesn't mean you're an anti-John person now. You're just laying off the low performers. In the same case, this might end up being true where Meta does their layoffs and there is a slightly elevated amount of, say, LGBTQ people or people of color within those layoffs because they hired those people meeting those demographics at the expense or despite their low performance. That's just the way it was. But here we have tech journalists working for computerworld.com coming out and saying that it's a doomsday scenario. See, everybody gets scared because there's going to be some anti-LGBTQ layoffs. Zuck's going to lay off people because they're gays and trannies. That's what they're presenting to people. They're whipping people into a frenzy. They're pushing people towards their agenda, manipulating people and lying to people in order to enact extremely racist and sexist hiring and firing policies. They're coming to the defense of extreme racism. It's crazy. I'm just going to read one little last tidbit here from the last bit of this Computer World article because it's insane. What it all comes down to is that if you're not a straight white guy, the job market is going to become a lot harder for you. As for companies, they'll suffer as well. I fear, though, that we're stuck with this trend until cold, hard financial facts convince corporate leadership that right-wing politics leads to poor business decisions. End quote. Okay. So is that a little bit nuts? Yeah, it's a little bit nuts. It's a bit nuts. Is that delusional? Yes, it's undoubtedly delusional. The crazy thing here, though, is it is in line with all of the reporting that we're seeing from every major tech news outlet. Some of them are more overt. I'm quoting the computerworld.com article here because it's so extreme. Here, this one from Stephen Von Nichols. Who has done some decent work in the past. He covers all sorts of stuff, but it's so extreme. The reporting from Fast Company and whatnot is a little less extreme, but no less clearly pushing the same agenda, right? Vilify anything that's right-wing, vilify Trump, vilify Musk, anyone who happens to agree on even one thing or appears to agree on one thing with Trump or Musk or anyone else, vilify them. Case in point, Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg for years has been in many ways defended by a lot of these people for censoring conservatives. Now that Mark Zuckerberg is like, well, maybe we shouldn't censor conservatives, all the tech journalists are like, well, great, now we need to roast Mark Zuckerberg alive. We need to string him up and hang him from the hanging tree, right? It's crazy. It's crazy that that's where we're going here. Another quote here, just because it's just extreme, from computerweekly.com. But rather than ramp up the push for diversity, companies are dialing back their diversity, equality, and inclusion (DEI) initiatives as they face budget cuts and fears of backlash for taking the wrong approach. This paints a bleak picture. It's gonna be so scary because we won't have people, blah 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 blah. Now, I mean, we've got so many companies like that are going down the okay, let's reconsider our DEI initiative route, right? Like, where is that here? Like Meta, right? Meta's clearly looking at ending a lot of their DEI initiatives. Whatever the reasons are, that does appear to be happening. IBM and Red Hat are not ending their DEI initiatives, and they're getting sued up the yin yang for it. We've got Apple. Apple's got a vote coming up at the end of February about whether or not to end the DEI policies. And the Apple board wants to continue the DEI policies, even though it would be at the expense of the shareholders, right? And what's fascinating here, and this isn't new, right? None of this is new. If there are these extreme political extremists that really love racist and sexist hiring and firing within tech companies, these tech journalists always come to the defense of those ideas. The Register is an interesting example because the Register is a tech news outlet. You can go to theregister.com. It used to be theregister.co.uk, but theregister.com, and check them out. Some of the reporting is good, right? It's not like they're an all bad thing, but regularly when they feel forced to cover some of the stories about the racist hiring and firing, the few times that has happened, they come to the defense of whoever is doing the racist hiring and firing, right? So like IBM and Red Hat, they got sued after I badgered them repeatedly about the fact that they kept ignoring that story. One of the biggest stories in the last several years relating to big tech business. They finally covered it. And what did they do? They focused on how the victim in that case, the person who was discriminated against because of his skin color, because of his gender, because of his religion, he was bad because of his skin color and gender and religion. And anyone who defended him was bad and probably loved Trump. And Trump is evil, right? An extreme political agenda. The article they wrote on that was 2/3 extreme political agenda, almost more extreme than some of the quotes I've read for you here today. When I called them out on it, I mean, it bullied them to the point where they actually ended up temporarily deleting and suspending their Twitter account to avoid the onslaught of people online being like, wow, why are you defending the racism and sexism of Red Hat and IBM? They're breaking the law. They're going to get sued. This isn't going to go well for them. And it's morally and ethically wrong. Like, why are you, the Register, doing that? And they never backed down off that. They kept going with it. And what's interesting, and I just want to point this out a little bit more, is the Register and other tech news outlets who get 90+% of their funding from these big tech companies like IBM, like Red Hat, and on and on and on. They also regularly come to the defense of those organizations and any government organizations that back them. For example, last September, the Register ran an article belittling, bad-mouthing, and vilifying anyone who starts pointing at the connections between Google, Niantic, the Pokemon Go creator, and the CIA, which there are many. Not a conspiracy theory. It's just, here's a list of financial connections, right? And some government officials in multiple other governments have pointed to that and being like, well, that's a concern. Government officials in the United States government actually feel like it's a concern, which is interesting. And the Register, though, came to the defense of Google and Niantic and the CIA and whatnot. Once again, these tech news outlets, these tech journalists, they regularly spin things to protect the big tech companies, especially, primarily, and most viciously when it also falls in line with their extremist political views. In this case, that you must discriminate against white people, or you must discriminate against men, or you must discriminate against straight people. This is an ongoing thing. An ongoing thing. You must discriminate against religious people, Christian, Jewish, whatever. And that's a real thing. Those are lawsuits going on right now against IBM. And so, but these tech news outlets, if they cover them at all, they cover them in extreme ways, where they come to the defense, they rally, they circle the wagons to defend the racism and the sexism. The Lunduke Journal is just about the only one that doesn't. And what's crazy is when I come out and say racism bad, sexism bad, discrimination based on religion bad, I just don't like those things. I'm not a big fan. Don't do those things. When I come out and say that, when I point to it happening, when I point to lawsuits occurring because of these things that are happening in big tech, that could bring down these big tech companies, thus having a dramatic impact on not just the whole of the industry, the employment options available for developers and everyone else working in IT, and the technology that is produced, the software and the hardware that comes out of it. The impact is profound. And when I point that out, I get told that I'm being too political. I get shunned. I get ostracized. I get censored and blacklisted. I get entire Fediverse Mastodon servers, forums, etc. literally get shut down and blocked entirely because I exist on them, or someone mentioned my name too many times. People get banned and blocked from the GNOME Foundation and multiple other organizations simply for saying my name out loud, or writing it down, or linking to an article of mine. And all of them push the same agenda that we're seeing from the likes of this Computer World article over and over and over again. But I'm the political one. I'm trying to stop this insanity. I'm trying to stop the crazed politicalness. I like software for the sake of software. I like computers for the sake of computers, and engineering for the sake of engineering. And I feel that regardless of our politics, we as nerds should be able to come together and enjoy being nerdy together. We should be able to nerd out over a cool computer or a cool new software release, regardless of who we voted for in the last election. We should be able to do that. I remember a time when we could do that. We could grab a hamburger and nerd out about a new update to a video game that we like, regardless of whether or not we support the same political candidates. It doesn't matter. Now, we can disagree about politics, and that's fine, and we can have those discussions in the open. That's fine. But almost without fail, all of these tech journalists that I talked about here today, and so many others, and their corporate overlords, want me to not be heard. They want to ban me from things. They want to shun me from things. They talk out loud about making sure that I am not platformed, if you will, because I don't push the same political ideologies that they do. I push not racism, and they push, yes, more racism, please. And that is insane to me. It is insane. I had to point this out because I started looking around at all of the coverage of the Meta announcement and what's happening with Apple and what's happening with IBM and Red Hat. And you notice, one, what news does not get covered, right? The current lawsuits happening with IBM, and most outlets, they're ignoring those entirely. When there's no choice and they have to cover it, they have to cover Meta or Apple. They cover it because there's a boogeyman there, right? They can say, "Ooh, Meta's being mean," because they're saying, "No, we're going to do less racist stuff, less censorship." Well, the tech journalists of the world, they love censorship. They love racism. They love sexism. It's right there in their articles over and over again. But I want to say thank you to all of you who allow me to do this sort of coverage without having to worry about what my corporate overlords are going to think, because I got no corporate overlords. In fact, most of the corporate overlords of all of those tech news outlets They specifically hate me. Some of those companies have policies, literal policies, sometimes written, where they cannot discuss Brian Lunduke. Don't respond to the Lunduke Journal, whatever you do. Don't quote a Lunduke Journal article. Don't link to a Lunduke Journal article. Don't respond to Lunduke, no matter what. They have meetings to talk about how to handle my most recent coverage regularly because they fear me. So they fear the Lunduke Journal, but they control all of the other tech news media. That's not hyperbole. That's not made up. That's just the reality of what's happening. And you can see it. You can see the results in that, in the coverage, in the lack of honesty, in almost all, with a few tiny exceptions, but almost all of tech news media out there. It's crazy. And that's entirely possible for me to do this work because of all of you who support the Lunduke Journal. Go to lunduke.com, watch, listen, read, follow me anywhere you want. Local, Substack, YouTube, Patreon, X, Rumble, Facebook. You can even audio podcast, RSS feeds, iTunes, Spotify. I don't care. Grab my stuff wherever you want. Share it however you want. Share it with everyone. And if you feel like sponsoring the Lunduke Journal, well, subscribing to the Lunduke Journal. I don't take sponsorships. I don't run ads. But if you want to support the show, go to lunduke.com. There's links there that will show you how you can pitch in a couple of buckazoids and help keep the Lunduke Journal speaking truth to power. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across this glorious inner tube of ours, I do declare, end broadcast.